The galaxy waited in silence, the council chamber filled with the sound of 1,000 alien voices whispering in expectation for the deadly simulation to begin. Every star empire had gathered for this event, and every species knew what it meant. For honor and pride, the Arctic hunting simulation was no ordinary game. It was the greatest trial ever created by alien hands. A place of frozen storms where beasts stronger than tanks prowled the wastelands, and where no life had ever lasted more than hours. The storm itself was a killer. Ice wind could rip metal apart, and the predators were designed only for blood. Yet, despite all this, a strange name was added to the list of competitors, a name that made the council laugh. The word was simple human. The council screens glowed with light, and one by one, the alien leaders leaned forward, their many eyes and tentacles shifting as they stared at the frozen world inside the simulation chamber. In the center of the ice stood nothing but silence, nothing but a blizzard raging endlessly. Machines dropped razor beasts onto the ice, and each creature roared with hunger. Their shadows moved like nightmares under the pale light. The audience cheered, hungry for death. They wanted to see another creature fall before the storm. They wanted to see the ice tear flesh and bone and prove once more that only alien strength could endure. But then a door opened. Out of the gate walked a single human wrapped in furs that looked too thin for the cold. His face was not hidden. His eyes stared forward into the endless storm. He did not run, and he did not tremble. Instead, he walked with slow, steady steps straight into the blizzard. The alien council burst into laughter. They whispered in disbelief. One voice shouted, "This is madness. The human will freeze in seconds." Another hissed, "He will beg for mercy." Soon their screens showed his heartbeat. His breath, his body temperature, all should have dropped already, but instead he kept moving forward through the storm. The blizzard howled like a monster. The ice cracked like thunder. The human pushed forward, one hand shielding his eyes from the snow. His boots crunched on the endless white. He did not build shelter, and he did not hide. He simply walked deeper, as if the storm was nothing to him. The alien commentators laughed louder. Some said the human was suicidal. Others said he had no idea what was waiting for him in the dark. But in the back rows a few alien scientists stayed silent. They looked at the data with growing unease. They knew humans came from a world with ice ages, storms that lasted centuries, oceans that froze, and mountains that burned in fire. Their history was one of survival against nature, not avoidance of it. And something about the way this human moved gave them an uneasy feeling. Razor beasts picked up his scent. Their jaws clicked with hunger. Rows of teeth glistened as they crawled forward. These predators had shredded armored warriors before. They had hunted species that could bend steel with claws, and none had lasted, but the human did not change his pace. He did not look behind the sensors, showed the beasts closing in, 5 of them. Massive shapes in the white haze, their red eyes glowed like fire. Yet when the first beast leapt through the snow, the human spun. Suddenly his arm carried a sharpened spear made from nothing but a broken piece of ice and a strip of cloth he had torn from his coat. The spear struck deep into the beast's throat. The creature collapsed in the snow, choking on its own blood. The audience fell silent. How did he craft a weapon so fast? How did he even think to use the ice itself? The commentators whispered in shock. The other beasts hesitated for a moment. Unused to prey that fought back, the human stood tall against the storm, his breath heavy but his eyes alive with fire. He pulled the spear free and raised it once more, and the galaxy, watching through the great screens, began to feel something they had never felt while watching this simulation before. Fear. The beasts attacked together, rushing through the snow with claws slashing. Human dodged to the side, letting one beast crash into another. His boots dug into the ice, and he drove the spear into a second predator's chest. The third beast snapped its jaws, but the human rolled across the snow, grabbing a shard of broken ice, stabbing upwards into its eye. Alien children in the viewing galleries screamed. The adults stared in silence. They had never seen such speed, such raw instinct from prey yet. The storm only grew stronger, winds like knives cut across the land. Snow turned the world blind, and still the human did not stop. He tore strips of hide from the fallen beasts and wrapped them around his arms to shield against the cold. He cut meat from their flesh and stored it against his belt for food he used. their bones as tools, and his fireless camp was built with nothing but his will. Aliens gasped. How could he adapt so fast? No one had ever survived long enough to even try. Every other species had simply died running from the cold or the beasts. But this human treated the storm like an old enemy one he had faced before ours passed, and the council grew restless. Some shouted to increase the challenge. Others argued that the simulation was already failing, because the human had lasted longer than any alien warrior had in centuries. The chamber, filled with anger, disbelief, and slowly rising fear because the one thing the galaxy had agreed upon was being destroyed in front of their eyes. The truth was simple. Their perfect death trap was not enough for one human. The storm thickened to the point where even alien drones lost visual feed, but the sound of movement still came through the sensors, faint but steady. Footsteps echoing through endless white. The audience leaned forward, every eye straining to catch a glimpse of the lone figure in the dark, and when the feed returned for a moment, the image that flashed upon the screen sent a shiver through the chamber. The human was walking, not crawling, not hiding, not trembling, just walking deeper into the storm, as if he belonged there, as if the cold was nothing. Whispers spread like fire across the chamber. This should not be possible. No body could handle such cold. No species could fight so long against so many predators without rest. And yet the human kept moving. Some called him insane. Others called him cursed. But deep inside, a question formed in the minds of even the proudest alien lords. What if humans were different? What if this was not luck but nature? The simulation continued, the storm screaming across the land, tearing apart trees of ice. The human pressed forward, every step heavy yet unbroken. He looked up at the sky, though no stars could be seen through the storm, and for a moment he smiled. No alien knew. Because it was not the smile of prey, it was the smile of a survivor who had found purpose. The predators circled again, new ones, larger, faster. Released by the council in anger, the human did not run. Instead, he crouched low, drawing lines in the snow, marking traps with the precision of an engineer, and when the beasts charged, they fell into hidden pits that he had carved using nothing but time and patience. Alien children gasped. Alien generals swore this was not a game anymore. This was war. The first night in the storm came, and still the human lived. He lit no fire, but built walls of ice around his camp. He ate the meat of the beasts and drank the water of the snow. His body shook with cold, but his spirit burned hotter than flame. The storm tried to bury him, but he rose each time, never bowing, never surrendering. His footsteps left a trail across the endless white, a trail that every alien I followed in silence. The chamber, once filled with laughter, now felt heavy like a tomb. The alien council watched in silence, unable to speak because the truth was now clear. The deadly simulation designed to break every species had failed. The human had walked into the storm not to die but to survive, and as the wind howled louder, carrying his shadow across the snow, one thought echoed across the galaxy: if one human could endure this, then what could an entire world of humans endure? And so the first part of the legend was written in the storm, not with ink or fire, but with the footsteps of a single man walking alone through a world meant to kill him, refusing to fall, refusing to freeze, refusing to bow to the pride of a galaxy that thought him weak. And with every step deeper into the storm, the silence in the alien chamber grew heavier. The storm was supposed to end him, but instead it had awakened a question that no alien wanted to ask, yet could no longer ignore. What are humans really? Storm raged stronger than before. The blizzard screamed across the wasteland with knives of ice. The alien council watched in silence. Their laughter from before had faded into nervous whispers. The human was still alive. His body should have collapsed long ago, yet his footsteps still carried him forward. His heart still beat steady. The monitors showed him fighting, not against the storm, but with it. His movements were slow but never weak, every step a defiance of death. In the viewing galleries, alien nobles shifted in their seats, their eyes wide, their mouths twisted in unease. One of them hissed, "This cannot be. He is no warrior, he is no beast. How can he survive?" The storm alone, another whispered, "He is only human." But deep inside, they knew this was no ordinary prey. This was something else. Something dangerous. The razor beasts that remained followed his trail, their red eyes glowing through the snow there. Claws scraping across the frozen earth, they had killed countless challengers before, their bodies made to endure the storm. Their jaws made to rip steel, but now they hesitated, as if even they felt the strangeness of this lone man walking through the white. The human moved with purpose, his hands raw and frozen but steady. He cut ice into shapes. He set traps along his path, every line in the snow. A weapon, every broken shard. A tool, he tied strips of beast hide around his arms to block the wind he rubbed. Snow on his wounds to freeze the bleeding. He chewed the frozen meat for strength. His body shook, his breath came heavy, but his eyes burned like fire. The Alien Council ordered the next phase to begin. They would not allow this human to humiliate them. The storm was one thing, the beasts another, but now they released. Phase 2, hunters, the biomechanical predators, creatures of iron and flesh with claws sharper than swords and eyes that glowed like fire. They fell from the sky into the snow, their metal limbs crushing the ice, their roars echoing across the wasteland. The audience leaned forward, eager again to see blood. They thought the human would finally fall. They thought his tricks and his courage would mean nothing against such machines. The hunters spread out across the white, circling in silence, their sensors locking on his body heat, their jaws dripping with poison. The human paused in the storm, his head turned. He saw shadows moving in the haze. He heard metal tearing against the ice, and instead of running, instead of hiding, he crouched low, his fingers pressed against the snow, his mind calm, his eyes searching. He had seen predators before, back on Earth's wolves, lions, machines of war, and he knew the pattern. He knew the circle of death that hunters used. He whispered to himself, though the storm carried his words away, and he waited. The first hunter leapt, its claws flashing in the snow. The human moved at the last second, rolling aside the claws ripped only. Ice's hand grabbed the broken spear from the ground, and he drove it upward into the soft joint. Beneath the machine's arms, sparks burst. The beast screeched and collapsed, thrashing in the snow. Chamber erupted in shouts the aliens could not believe what they saw. The human had studied the machine in a heartbeat, had found the weakness no challenger had ever lasted. More than a moment against them, but this man had wounded one with nothing but speed and instinct. The other hunters charged. Together, their red eyes burning through the haze, the human ran now, but not in fear. He led them into the path he had carved earlier, where lines in the snow hid deadly traps. One beast lunged and fell into a pit of sharpened ice shards. Another stepped onto a frozen slope and slid helplessly into jagged rocks. The human turned with a snarl and struck at the third beast, driving ice into its exposed sensors. The storm roared around them. But it was not the storm that killed, it was the human, the alien. Audience gasped, their hearts pounding, their pride crumbling. The council shouted, "This is impossible! Increase the storm. Unleash more hunters." But nothing worked, because with every new danger, the human grew sharper, stronger, faster, his will cutting through the blizzard like a blade. He paused only once, building a shelter of beast bones and ice walls around his body, his hands bleeding from the work, his breath visible in the air. He sat for a moment, chewing frozen meat, his eyes never closing, his ears sharp to the sound of the storm, his mind remembering Earth, the mountains of ice. His ancestors had walked the winds of the tundra that had shaped his people. He whispered again, though none could hear, "This storm is not yours. This storm is mine." The alien scientists leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the data. They whispered to each other, "This is not strength alone. This is memory. This is adaptation. Humans carry the history of their planet in their blood. They evolved with storms that no machine could design. Their bodies are weak, but their minds refuse to break." The human rose again, stepping out of his shelter into the endless white, his legs heavy, his face raw, but his spirit burning. The storm grew worse. Lightning cracked across the sky, thunder rolled through the ice. The hunters came again, circling, roaring, their voices shaking the land. Yet the man walked toward them. He carried no fear, only purpose. One hunter charged faster than the others, claws tearing the snow apart. The human dropped to his knees, sliding beneath. Strike, his hand reached up, gripping the creature's throat wires, and muscles snapped as he tore into it with jagged bone. The beast fell in sparks and silence. The storm carried its body, Away the humans stood again, dripping blood both his and theirs, but still alive though. Council chambers shook with argument. Some demanded the human be killed. Immediately outside the rules, others warned against it, saying if one human could do this, then there may be more, and they could not risk war with such a species. The galaxy had laughed at Earth, but now Earth was no longer a joke. Human continued forward into the heart of the storm, his path marked with the corpses of beasts and machines. His steps slow but steady, each one echoing across the simulation chamber. Every alien watching knew this was no longer entertainment, it was revelation hours. Turned to daze, yet the man refused to fall. He tore the storm apart with his will. He bent the death trap into his weapon. He hunted the hunters and made their bones his tools. His eyes glowed with determination, his voice silent but powerful. The storm had not taken him, it had made a man. As the council stared in fear, a thought grew heavier. And heavier in their minds. If this was one human alone, what would happen if the galaxy faced all of humanity? Storms screamed across the white land. The snow rose in waves like an ocean of ice. The human kept walking through it, his body torn his hands red but his spirit burning brighter than fire. The alien council stared from their chamber in silence. Some leaned forward with trembling hands. Others whispered in fear their pride, breaking piece by piece, for never before had anyone lasted this long. Never before had the storm failed to kill. The hunters were gone, their broken bodies scattered across the snow, yet the simulation was not finished. The storm was endless, the predators endless, and the council desperate to see the man fall. Their voices rose in anger, their orders sharp. Unleash Phase 3. They cried, release the beasts that no one has ever faced before from. The sky fell shapes darker than the storm, their wings like shadows, their jaws filled with teeth that glowed. Blue in the stormlight, they landed in silence, their massive claws carving lines into the ice, their bodies larger than buildings. The sound of their breath shaking the air. These were the Razor Lords, the masters of the hunt predators built only for destruction. The alien audience gasped. Even they had rarely seen these creatures. They were death-given shape. They'd ended entire trials within minutes. No prey had ever struck them. No prey had even made them bleed. Yet now they stalked the snow in search of one human. One shadow walking through the storm. The man saw them, their shapes moving like nightmares in the haze. Their roars shaking the ice mountains around him. He stopped, his body heavy, his eyes burning. He gripped the bone spear in his hand and waited. The wind tore at his face, but he stood tall, his breath slow, steady like a warrior facing his final trial. The first Razor Lord lunged its claws, slashing like lightning, its roar louder than thunder. The human dropped to the ground, rolling across the snow. The beast slammed into the ice, cracking the land apart. Shards flew through the storm. The human rose quickly. His eyes locked on its weak spot where metal joined flesh. He leaped forward, stabbing his spear with all his strength. The beast roared, twisting its head. The spear cracked, but the tip pierced deep enough to draw dark blood. The galaxy watching froze in silence. One had ever done this? No one had ever made a Razor Lord bleed. The chamber filled with gasps. Some aliens covered their eyes. Others shouted in rage, this cannot be. This is against nature. He is only human. The beast screamed, thrashing its massive tail, sending the man flying across the snow. His body hit the ice hard, his blood staining the audience thought he was dead, but slowly, painfully, the man rose again, his breath ragged, his legs shaking, but his eyes never breaking. The storm howled around him as if it too demanded him to fall, but he refused. The second Razor Lord charged its wings, slicing the air. The human stumbled aside, barely escaping its claws. He grabbed shards of ice from the ground, throwing them into its glowing eyes. The creature shrieked, blinded for a moment. The human ran forward, climbing its massive arm, stabbing with broken bone and jagged stone, his body small compared to the beast, yet his will larger than the storm. Aliens leaned forward, unable to breathe. They had seen warriors of iron fall in seconds, yet this fragile creature with skin and bone alone was fighting like a storm given form. The data screens showed his body breaking, his muscles torn, his heartbeat raging, yet still he climbed, still he struck until the beast crashed into the ground. Screaming, the human fell to his body. Rolling across the ice, he coughed blood, his vision fading, but he forced himself to rise again. He tore flesh from the fallen beast, wrapping it around his wounds, his body. Shaking from pain, but his spirit stronger than steel, he whispered to himself. Words the storm carried away, but the galaxy could see them on his lips. I will not die here. The third beast moved in the haze, circling its eyes, glowing through the snow. It was patient, more cunning than the others. It studied him, waiting for weakness, but the human studied too. He crouched low, his hands shaping traps in the ice, digging. With bleeding fingers he made sharp walls of snow. He carved pits with broken claws of the fallen beast. Every second the storm screamed. Every second the alien council whispered with fear. At last, the beast lunged the ground, shattered as it fell. Into his trap, spears of ice rising into its body, the man leapt forward, driving his weapon into its throat. The creature roared, shaking the land, but slowly it fell, crashing to the ground. The snow buried it, the storm silenced it. The man stood over it, his body shaking but his eyes alive. The chamber of aliens sat in silence. None spoke, none laughed, none mocked. Their pride was gone, replaced with something they had never felt before. Fear, because the truth was now clear. The simulation designed to kill the strongest warriors in the galaxy had failed again. It had failed before one human. The human staggered forward through the storm, his hands dripping red, his body torn, but his will unbroken. He had faced the Razor Lords and lived. His footsteps echoed across the snow, carrying a message that no alien could ignore. The storm was not his enemy. The beasts were not his hunters. He was theirs. Alien council debated in whispers. Some demanded to end the trial, to kill him before the galaxy learned the truth. Others argued to continue for curiosity, to see how far he could go, but deep in their hearts, they already knew what this meant. If one human alone could fight their greatest predators, what would an army of humans do? What would a world of humans become? The storm did not rest. It grew darker, heavier thunder, rolling lightning, tearing the sky. The human walked into it without fear, his shadow tall against the white, his eyes bright with fire, every step a challenge, every breath a victory. And the galaxy watched in silence as the storm itself seemed to bow before him. So the third chapter of his trial was written not in words but in blood and ice. The storm still howled, the predators still waited, but the human had become more than prey, more than survivor. He had become hunter, and as the alien council trembled in silence, one question spread across the galaxy. Like fire, if this is only the beginning, what comes next? The storm raged darker than ever. The sky cracked with lightning, and the snow spun like a living beast across the frozen land. The human kept moving, his steps heavy but steady, his body wounded but unbroken. The predators he had killed lay silent behind him, their blood frozen into the ice. The alien council watched every movement on the glowing screens, their voices low and fearful, their pride falling apart piece by piece inside. The chamber whispers turned to arguments. One alien lord shouted, "This is against nature. No human can stand against." The Razor Lords, "This must be a trick," another hissed. "No trick. His blood carries something else. Something dangerous." The scientists at the edge of the hall spoke softly, but their words carried weight. They said, "Humans come from storms of their own. Planet storms that lasted centuries, storms that taught them to endure where others would fall." The council grew restless. Some wanted to end the simulation, to erase the shame. Others demanded to continue, to push him deeper, to prove once and for all that no species could defy them. The human did not know of their debates. He only knew the storm. He only knew the endless snow, his breath heavy, his wounds burning, yet his mind sharp, his eyes searching every shadow he moved through the blizzard. Like a hunter, his body shaking, yet his will harder than the ice. He stopped sometimes, crouching low, carving new tools from bone and ice-sharpening edges, tying them with strips of frozen hide. His hands raw, his fingers numb, yet his spirit alive. He built traps with patience. He marked the land with signs only he understood. The predators that survived circled him, but did not attack, not yet. Their red eyes glowed in the storm, but their bodies stayed back as if something greater than fear held them away. They had seen their kin fall. They had felt his will, and even beasts born of metal and blood hesitated before him. The storm screamed above, but the silence of the predators was louder in The council chamber, the voices rose again. One cried, "Unleash Phase 4. The apex predator will end this," another snarled. "No, wait, study him. Watch him. See what he becomes. The galaxy needs to know what humans are before we decide what to do." The argument shook the hall, threats thrown across the air, alliances breaking in whispers because the truth was heavy, and none could deny it anymore. This one human was showing them a mirror of their own weakness. Human pressed deeper into the storm, climbing frozen cliffs, his body dragged by the wind, his arms cut by ice. He used ropes made of beast sinew. He carved steps into the mountain, his breath sharp in the air. He looked like a shadow moving across endless white. The alien children in the viewing galleries whispered in fear their parents, pulling them close, for never before had prey looked like this. Never before had weakness looked like strength. Hours passed into darkness. The storm no longer felt like enemy. It felt like companion, every gust of wind pushing him forward, every crack of ice warning him of danger. His eyes shone like fire in the stormlight. He stopped at the peak of an ice ridge, looking out across the wasteland. The blizzard cleared for only a moment, and the galaxy saw what he saw: endless white, endless silence. The broken bodies of beasts behind him, and the unknown before him. Yet he smiled, not with joy but with defiance, the smile of one who refuses to bow. The council chamber fell silent. Seeing that smile, it spread fear deeper than claws, deeper than storms. Because it was not the smile of prey, it was the smile of a hunter, a survivor, one who had faced death and found strength in it. An alien general whispered, "If he lives, the galaxy will never be the same." Another replied, "Then we must make sure he does not live." But their voices trembled with doubt, for they knew the truth already. The simulation had failed. Their pride had failed. Human built shelter once more, walls of ice higher and stronger than before, bones of beasts standing like towers. Around him he sat inside, chewing frozen meat, his body healing little by little, his eyes never closing. He remembered his ancestors, who crossed mountains, who faced endless winters, who fought storms that buried worlds, and he whispered to himself, "You are nothing to me, storm. You are only memory." The storm answered with a scream but could not touch him. Predators grew restless, circling farther away. Their eyes glowing through the haze, they felt something they had never felt before: hesitation. They were made for death, but now they were hunted. The human watched them in silence, his traps waiting in the snow, his tools sharp in his hands, his mind calm and steady. He was no longer prey. He had become master of the storm, the council argued. Through the night, their voices sharp, their faces twisted, some demanded to destroy Earth before its people could rise. Others said to hide the truth, to keep the galaxy blind. Some few whispered a darker thought. Perhaps the humans were not enemy, but the future, perhaps they were meant to stand beside or above all others, but no one dared speak it too loud for fear of what it meant for their empires. The storm grew once more, thunder cracking across the sky, lightning tearing down mountains. The human rose again, stepping into the chaos, his shadow tall against the white, every movement carrying weight. He walked without fear, he walked without doubt, and every eye across the galaxy followed him. Even those who hated him could not look away. He was no longer one man in a storm, he was a symbol, and the galaxy knew it. The predators attacked again, testing his strength, but fell to his traps. Their bodies broken in silence, the snow turned red, then white again as the storm buried them. He left their bones behind, carrying only what he needed, moving forward without rest, without pause, every step deeper into the simulation. Every step heavier on the hearts of those who watched. The alien children whispered again, "Why does he not fall? Why does he not die?" Their parents had no answer. Their leaders had no courage. Their generals had no pride, only silence. The truth was clear. The storm that was supposed to break him was teaching him to rise. The beasts that were supposed to hunt him were teaching him to fight. The council that wanted to mock him now feared his shadow more than any war. The human paused again at the edge of a frozen chasm, his breath heavy, his body weak but his eyes alive. He looked across the abyss and began to climb down slowly, carefully, using ropes of hide, carving steps into the ice. Every movement precise, every decision sharp. The storm screamed louder. lightning flashing above, but he continued without fear, his body against the storm, his will against. The abyss. The council saw his descent and whispered, "He goes where none have gone, he enters the heart of the storm, and still he does not bow," one alien scientist said softly. "Perhaps the storm is not testing him. Perhaps it is teaching him. Perhaps it is his ally." The words spread across the chamber, chilling more than the storm itself. Human reached the bottom of the chasm, a land of darkness where even the storm could not reach. Shadows, deep silence, heavy. The ground cracked with ancient ice older than stars. He moved through it, steady, his weapons ready, his traps prepared. The predators did not follow here. They feared the dark, but he did not. He walked with steady steps, as if he belonged. The galaxy watched in silence. No laughter, no cheers, only fear and wonder, because the truth was growing heavier with every breath. If one man could do this, then the galaxy was not ready for his people. If one human could turn storm into ally and predators into prey, then Earth was no weak world. Earth was danger. Earth was storm. And as the human vanished deeper into the dark, his shadow swallowed by the abyss, the alien council sat frozen in silence. The storm howled above, but the true storm was now inside. Their hearts' fear of the future, fear of what humanity was, and fear of what was coming. The abyss below the storm was colder than death, darker than night. The human moved through it with slow, steady steps, his eyes glowing in the dim light, his breath white in the frozen air above. The alien council watched with silence, their voices gone there. Pride shattered their fear, growing heavier with every passing moment, for nothing they had sent had ended him. No storm, no beast, no machine had broken his will. The chambers of power trembled with arguments. Some cried to end the trial, now to bury the truth before the galaxy learned what humans truly were. Others demanded to continue to release the last creation, the one thing that had never been unleashed in the simulation, for no prey had ever lived long enough to face it. The apex predator, the perfect weapon of the hunt, part flesh, part machine, part nightmare, built only to destroy. The order was given. The sky above the simulation cracked open with thunder. The ground shook as massive doors of steel parted from the ice. A roar rose, so deep it shook the bones of every watcher across the galaxy. The alien children screamed at their parents, covered their eyes. The council members sat frozen as the apex rose into the storm. It was larger than buildings, taller than the towers of alien cities. Its body a mountain of muscle and machine, its claws glowing with molten light, its eyes burning red through the snow, its breath a cloud of fire. It moved with the weight of a god. The storm itself bent around its body, the wind shifting as if afraid, the ice cracking beneath its steps. The human stopped in the darkness below the abyss. He felt the tremor of its steps. He heard the roar that shook the land. His eyes narrowed. His hands tightened around his weapons, his body broken, yet his spirit blazing. The apex had come for him, and he would not bow. The alien council watched in silence, their hearts racing. They believed the end had come. They believed the human would finally fall before the beast they had created to end all things. They whispered to each other, "This will be the end of him. Nothing can survive." The apex, the storm cleared for a moment, and the galaxy saw it. The man standing small in the snow, facing the mountain of the apex, his shadow tiny, his body weak, but his eyes unbroken. The apex roared, shaking the heavens, its claws tearing through the ice. The man stood unmoving, waiting, watching, his breath calm, his will steady. Beast charged forward, its steps breaking the land. The man moved only at the last second, rolling aside as the massive claws struck where he had stood. The ice shattered, exploding upward, shards flying through the storm. The man grabbed a spear of broken ice and drove it into the leg of the beast. Sparks flew. The apex roared in rage, but the wound was small, too small to matter. Yet the galaxy gasped, for never before had anyone even touched it. The human darted across the snow, his legs heavy but swift, his mind sharp, watching every movement of the beast, learning its rhythm, its strength, its weakness. The apex swung its massive tail, breaking mountains of ice. The man leaped over the shards, sliding across the frozen ground. He stabbed again into another joint of the machine flesh mixture, his body tossed aside by the force, but his eyes never breaking. The aliens leaned forward, their hearts racing, Some whispered, "He cannot win, he cannot stand," against that others whispered in silence. "He learns, he adapts, he fights like storm itself." The apex roared again, opening its jaws of fire. A wave of molten breath burning through the snow. The man ran through the smoke, his skin burning his body breaking, but he kept moving faster than the beast expected. He rolled beneath, his chest driving sharpened bone into its softer flesh sparks. And blood exploded across the ice. The beast screamed, shaking the sky. Storm itself twisting with its rage, the man fell rolling across the ground, coughing blood his body. Trembling, yet he forced himself to rise, his hands bleeding, his chest torn. But his eyes alive, he tore meat from the fallen wounds of the beast, wrapping it against his body for armor. He lifted shards of metal broken from its frame, turning them into new weapons, his hands shaking yet steady, his spirit refusing to bow. Apex came again, crashing into the land. The man slid aside, hiding behind walls of ice he had carved earlier. The beast struck them down, but the man used the moment to strike its leg again, carving a deeper, tearing wires and muscle. The apex roared. Staggering but still standing, the alien council gasped their fear, growing their silence heavy, for the beast was slowing and the man was not finished. The battle raged through the storm, the apex tearing mountains apart, the man darting through the snow, striking again and again, every wound small but building. Every strike learning more. The alien audience could not believe what they saw: a fragile human lasting against the ultimate predator, a symbol of weakness turning into symbol of fear. Storm grew wilder, lightning splitting the sky, thunder shaking the land. The man stood again in front of the beast, his weapons broken, his body torn, yet he stood, his eyes glowing, his shadow tall against the white. He whispered to himself, though none could hear, "I am not prey, and I will not fall." The apex charged, its roar shaking stars itself. The man leapt aside at the last moment, his trap ready, the pit he had carved with hours of patience. His spears of ice, sharp as blades, the beast fell forward, crashing into the trap, its massive body shaking the earth, its roar echoing through the storm. The man leaped onto its back, stabbing again and again with metal shards tearing into its neck. The beast screamed, thrashing the storm, breaking around them. Alien council rose to their feet, shouting in disbelief. The apex was faltering, the impossible was happening. The human was not dying, he was winning. The galaxy stared with wide eyes, their pride gone, their fear alive. The apex tried to rise, but its body weakened. The man struck again into the wound, deeper and deeper, until the red fire of its eyes dimmed, until its body fell silent, crashing into the snow. The storm howled above, but the land grew still. The man stood atop the fallen apex, his body shaking, his blood dripping, yet his eyes burning brighter than the stars. Alien chamber sat frozen, no voice, no sound, only silence. The unthinkable had happened. The apex predator, the weapon of the galaxy, had fallen before one human. The storm had failed, the beasts had failed, the council had failed, and the galaxy itself trembled with the truth. The man raised his broken weapon into the storm, his breath heavy, his voice silent, but his message clear: "I endure, I fight, I live." The storm carried his shadow across the land. The galaxy watched in silence as the human stood victorious, his small figure towering larger than empires, larger than legends. Because he had done what no one else could do, he had made the apex phalanx in the hearts of every alien watching. A new fear grew. If one human alone could do this, what would happen when all of humanity rose? What storm would they bring? What war would they become? The storm had gone quiet, yet the silence felt heavier than thunder. The body of the apex lay broken across the frozen ground, its molten breath gone, its fire dim, its shadow cold. The human stood upon it, blood dripping from his wounds, his chest rising and falling like the rhythm of war, his eyes unbroken, his stance like a mountain, though his body was battered. The galaxy stared, unable to look away inside the alien chamber. There was no sound, only the weight of disbelief. The council members sat frozen, their skin pale, their hands shaking, for they had seen the impossible. They had seen their perfect predator, their weapon of supremacy, fall before one small creature from a world they once ignored. Some whispered in broken voices, "This cannot be real. It must be a lie." Others cried out, "This recording must be destroyed." before it spreads across the stars, for if the galaxy learns of this human, nothing will ever be the same again. Their pride shattered their certainty. Gone yet, there were some who watched with different eyes not of denial but of fear, a deeper fear, for they knew what endurance truly meant. They saw not just the man standing above the corpse of the apex. They saw a shadow of humanity rising. They whispered, if one of them can do this, what of an army, what of a world, what of a species that will not both? Human moved slowly across the ice, his body torn yet his step steady. He searched through the broken frame of the fallen beast, pulling shards of metal and glowing wires, twisting them into weapons, his hands shaking, his breath shallow. But his will fierce. He knew the storm was not over. He knew the eyes of the galaxy still watched. He knew they waited for him to break, and he would not give them that satisfaction. The council argued among themselves, voices sharp echoing through. The chamber one shouted, release the storm again, drown him. Another shouted, no, the storm already failed the apex, already failed, nothing else remains. Another cried, end the simulation before he reaches the wall, before he escapes the abyss. Bet, a voice older and colder rose above them. The High Chancellor, his eyes narrow, his tone like ice, he said, if you end this now, he will live in legend. If you let him die here, he will vanish into myth. But if you let him walk further, if you let him reveal more, we may learn what truly makes them endure, and knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, is power. The chamber fell into silence. The decision hung heavy. They did not want to admit their fear, but they obeyed the Chancellor. The simulation remained active. The abyss continued. The man was allowed to walk on. Human continued through the storm, his eyes watching the endless snow, his ears catching distant whispers of beasts that had once stalked him. Yet now the land was quiet, too quiet, and he knew. The silence was not mercy, it was design. The aliens were watching and waiting. They were preparing something more, something hidden. Found a frozen cave carved deep into the cliffs, its mouth wide like the jaws of a beast. Inside he lit a fire using scraps of metal and shards of glowing stone, his body warm for the first time in days, his breath calmer, but his mind restless. He thought of the voices above, though he could not hear them. He felt their presence. He felt their eyes burning into his skin. He knew he was not just fighting for himself, he was fighting against the pride of Empire's. He rested. Shadows moved across the cave walls. He tightened his grip on his weapons. He whispered to himself, I am not prey. The shadows grew larger, then broke into figures smaller than the apex, weaker than the beasts before. Yet their movements were strange, their eyes glowing blue, their steps silent. They looked like hunters shaped from light and smoke. Hithi circled him with blades that shimmered in the darkness, their faces empty like masks, their forms half machine, half ghost. He rose slowly, his body weak, but his eyes alive. He faced them without fear. They struck fast, their blades slicing the air, but he was faster, dodging, rolling, striking his makeshift spear into one of them. The figure shattered into fragments of light and vanished. The others came harder, faster, sharper. He fought like storm itself, his breath fire, his body wind, his will unbroken above. The council watched in silence. They knew these were not beasts. These were echoes, constructs of memory weapons, shaped from the minds of countless fallen prey. Yet even they failed to stop him. One by one, the hunters of light fell, their forms breaking against the will of one man, until the cave was silent. A Genth man stood, shaking his body drenched in blood, his breath ragged, yet his eyes burning brighter than before. He whispered to himself, if this is all you have, then you do not understand what it means to fight. The council felt their fear deepen, for every trial had failed, every weapon, every storm. Every predator, their pride was gone, their fear unmasked. Some begged to end it, to cut the link, to erase the human before the truth spread. But again the Chancellor silenced them. He whispered, no, not yet. We must know more. Ether. Human left the cave, walking deeper into the abyss. He came upon a valley of shattered ice, where the wind screamed like a dying beast. In the center rose a tower of black stone, taller than mountains, its surface glowing with strange symbols, its peak lost in the storm. He felt its pull like a heartbeat calling him forward. He tightened his grip and walked. Council gasped, for they knew that tower. It was not part of the test. It was not part of their design. It was older than their simulations, older than their empires. It had been buried in the ice long before they came. They had built the hunt around it, never daring to awaken it. But now the human walked toward it. Unafraid, Storm grew violent as he approached, lightning tearing the sky, the ground shaking, the symbols glowing brighter. His breath quickened, his wounds burning, but he did not stop. He reached the base of the tower, placing his hand against the stone. The symbols flared a live light. Pouring across the valley, the galaxy watching through the screens felt the power tremble. Even their ships in orbit shook under the pulseth. Man whispered, though his voice was barely a breath open, and the stone obeyed the door. Sliding apart, the light swallowing him, the galaxy gasped as he disappeared. Into the towered council erupted with panic. Some cried, "Shut it down, shut it down." Another screamed, "He should not be there. No one should be there." The chancellor stood silent. His eyes narrow, for he knew now this was no longer a test. This was revelation inside. The tower, the man found halls of endless light walls, of shifting stars, floors that moved like water. He walked slowly, his eyes wide. His breath still, he saw visions of battles across time, wars that had shaped the galaxy, empires that had risen and fallen, and in all of them, shadows of humanity, faint echoes, standing tall, defying storms. Breaking change touched the walls, and the visions grew stronger. His mind filled with knowledge of forgotten ages, he saw that humanity had always been there. Hidden in corners of history, underestimated, ignored, until they rose and shattered the pride of others. He felt his blood burn with the truth. He was not alone. He was part of something vast, something eternally. Above, the council trembled, for they saw. It to the feed showed the visions, the truth they had buried, the history they had denied. The galaxy gasped, for every alien watching, every child, every soldier, every leader saw the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. They were the storm, they were the fire that never deeded. Human walked deeper into the tower, his steps steady. His eyes burning with new light, he whispered to himself, "They will know now, they will all know." And in the chamber, the chancellor spoke, his voice cold. "Like stone, it is too late to hide this. It is too late to silence it. The storm we built has become their storm, and the galaxy will never be the same." Silence that followed was heavier than death, heavier than defeat. It was the silence of a truth that could not be erased, the silence of fear that had no end. Far below, the tower still glowed brighter. The man still walked forward, his figure small, yet his shadow larger than empires. For he had survived what none could survive, and he had found what none were meant to find. Tower walls pulsed with light as the human walked deeper, each step echoing like thunder through the endless halls. The symbols shifted across the stone, glowing brighter each time his hand brushed against them. The visions filled his eyes with fragments of wars and whispers of ancient voices, yet he pressed forward, his body weak, but his will sharp like iron. Galaxy watched in silence, their screens filled with the image of one man walking into the heart of a mystery that no empire dared to touch. The council sat frozen, fear dripping from every breath. Some begged to cut the feed, to erase the vision from the galaxy. Yet their words shook with weakness, for they too could not look away. Man reached a chamber vast as the sky, its ceiling lost in swirling stars, its floor glowing with patterns of fire and ice. At the center stood a throne of crystal black as night, and upon it rested a figure unmoving like a statue carved from eternity. Its eyes closed, its form wrapped in shadow and light. The human slowed his steps, his heart beating heavy. He felt the weight of centuries pressing upon him, yet he did not both. Figure stirred, its eyes opening with a blaze of white fire. The chamber trembled. The walls screamed with voices of countless ages. The man stood unshaken, his hands tightening around his broken spear. The figure spoke, its voice echoing across the galaxy. "So you have entered the storm. So you have survived what none should survive. Tell me, human, why do you walk still? Why do you endure?" Man's voice was low but strong. "I walk because I will not fall. I endure because I refuse to bow. I fight because I am human," and that is Inoth. Figure's eyes burned brighter, its laughter cold and endless. "The storm has tested countless prey, yet all fell, none rose. You are different, but you are not the first to stand. Do you know what came before? Do you know the truth hidden beneath? The stars' walls around them shifted again, showing visions of countless beings, alien races, dragged into the storm, broken, crushed, shattered by the same trial. None survived. None stood except now this one man, the human. The vision then showed battles forgotten, where humans fought not with strength, but with will, where they burned through darkness, where they stood when all else fell. Figure whispered, they fear you not because of your power, but because of your endurance. They fear what cannot be broken, for that which cannot be. Wakanda. Be rule thee man stepped forward, his voice steady. Then they should fear, for we will not kneel above. The council trembled. The feed carried the words across the galaxy, and every world, every empire. Every race heard the voice of a single human echo. Like thunder across their skies, some were filled with awe, some with rage, but all with firth. Figure on the throne rose its body, towering like a mountain, its shadow filling the chamber, yet it bowed its head slightly and whispered, then the storm is yours now. The test no longer belongs to them. It belongs to youth. Man's breath grew. Heavy his wounds throbbed, but the fire in his chest roared. He asked, what do you mean? The figure pointed to the glowing walls, and the visions changed. They showed fleets of alien ships, armies of rulers, chains of slaves, shadows of empires built on fear. The figure whispered, they created this storm to prove themselves strong, but the storm was older. It was never theirs. It was mine, and now it is yours. Take it, human, wield it, and show them what endurance truly means. Galaxy, gasped the council. Screamed in panic, they cried, this must end, destroy. The tower silenced the feed. Their voices broke as the chancellor stood silent, his eyes narrow, for he saw the truth spreading faster than their lies. The man placed his hand on the throne. The chamber shook, light pouring across the valley. The tower roared like a living thing. The storm outside howled fiercer than ever. The snow turned to fire. The sky cracked with lightning. Ships in orbit trembled. Entire worlds felt the pulse through their bones. The storm was no longer theirs. The storm was hissed. Visions grew wild. The man saw futures rising, humans standing at the heart of fleets, humans breaking chains, humans fighting, not with weapons, but with unbreakable will. He saw galaxies trembling, not because of conquest, but because of defiance. He whispered to himself, we were never prey. We were always the stormed figure on the throne. Faded, its last words echoing across eternity, then rise. Human, for the galaxy will never forget it. Both chaos erupted. The council shouted in terror. Some tried to flee, some fell to their knees, others tore at their own skin in madness. The chancellor alone remained standing, his face pale, his voice hollow. So it has begun. Man turned from the throne, walking through the endless halls, the doors of the tower opening for him. Light pouring into the storm outside, he stepped into the blizzard. Yet the blizzard bent before him. The wind swirled, but did not touch him. The ice cracked, but did not break beneath him. His eyes burned brighter than fire. His figure, alone yet larger than any arm of galaxy, watched the feed, unbroken, the image of one human standing against storm and shadow, burned in two. Their minds across 1,000 worlds. Whispers rose, some saying he is chosen, some saying he is cursed, others saying he is the end, but all agreeing he is different. He is human. They council tried to cut the feed, yet every attempt failed. The storm itself carried the image across the stars, unstoppable, unbroken. Unstoppable like the man himself. There lies shattered their control. Ganetha human walked further across the abyss, his spear in hand, his wounds still bleeding, yet his steps steady. He knew the galaxy had seen, he knew the storm had changed, he knew war was coming, not the war of weapons, but the war of fear, the war of truth. In the dark corners of the galaxy, leaders whispered, prepare for the humans, prepare before they rise. Others whispered, ally with them before they destroy us. The seeds of chaos had been sown. The galaxy shifted in silence, waiting, watching. Fearing man found a ridge. Overlooking the valley below, where the tower still glowed. He stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the cold air on his skin, his heart heavy with what he had seen. He did not know if he wanted the storm. He did not know if he wanted to be more than himself, yet the storm had chosen him. and choice was no longer his above in orbit the fleets. Of the council shook commanders screaming orders, soldiers staring at screens their weapons. Ready yet none dared fire, for they knew it would change nothing their greatest beasts, their greatest hunters. Their storm had all failed against one Manthe. Chancellor's voice echoed across the chamber, broken and grim. This is the end of our age and the beginning of their SCI. Man raised his eyes to the storm, above his voice low, but carried by the winds. We will not kneel, we will not break, we will walk into every storm, and we will endure his. Words burned across the galaxy, and even in the silence that followed, every being knew a truth that could not be. Erased humans were not prey, humans were not weak, humans were not forgotten, humans were. The storm was only beginning. The storm wrapped around the valley like a living beast, yet it no longer howled with hunger instead, bent like a servant, its winds circling the lone human who stood tall, his body scarred his clothes. Torn yet, his eyes burning with a light that no blizzard could hide, the tower behind him glowed brighter than the stars, its shadow stretching across the land like a warning to all who watch it across the galaxy. The feed did not fade, screens flickered. On planets across 1,000 systems, the same vision showed a man standing against the storm. The people of every race stared in silence. Some in awe, some in disbelief, some in terror. They whispered to one another, "This cannot be real," yet none could. Turn away in the chamber of the council. Madness had already begun. The elders shouted at one another, their voices breaking under the weight of fear. Some demanded armies to descend upon the storm world. Others begged to seal it away forever, yet none dared move. The chancellor stood frozen, his hands trembling, his eyes locked on the screen before him. He whispered to himself, "The storm belongs to him now, and nothing we do can take it back." Human slowly raised his spear. Though broken, it glowed faintly with the same light that pulsed through the tower. He looked at it, his breath steady. He felt the weight of countless trials. Countless souls who had fallen before him, the memory of hunters, beasts, and endless nights of survival pressed against his mind, yet he refused to bend his voice low but sharp, cut through the storm. "I endured not for glory, not for power, but because I must. And if I can endure, then so can all who stand against the chains of Firth." Storm carried his words across the stars. Every world heard them, every ruler, every soldier, every child. His voice fell heavy upon their hearts, and none could escape its weight. The council screamed, "Cut the feed, cut the voice," but their commands were empty, for the storm itself had become the messenger, unstoppable, beyond their reach in distant worlds. Rebels hiding in shadows raised their heads, slaves chained in mines felt hope flicker in their hearts. Warriors bound by oaths of empires questioned the strength of their masters. The name human passed like fire through dry grass, unstoppable, spreading faster than any fleet man stood on the ridge. Watching the snow swirl around him, he felt the power of the storm sink into his veins. He did not understand it fully, but he knew it was alive. It was older than empires, older than the council, older than the hunt. It whispered to him, not with words, but with feeling endurance. Survival defiance. He clenched his fist and whispered back, "I will carry Youth Tower." Rumbled behind him, its walls shifting once more, showing visions of the future fleets. Clashing across endless stars, battles, fought not with numbers, but with will, and always at the center, the image of humans standing unbroken. The man frowned. He did not desire to be a symbol, yet he knew the galaxy had already chosen for Jim. In orbit above the storm world, the fleets of the council hesitated, weapons primed, commanders shouting orders, none daring to fire. They all stared at the storm bending before the lone human. Some whispered, "He cannot be killed." Others whispered, "If we fire, we invite our own end." Fear bound their hands tighter than any chain. Chancellor finally spoke, his voice broken. "Send the order, retreat now before the galaxy." Seize more. The commanders obeyed, not from loyalty, but from terror. The ships pulled back, engines burning, as they fled the world that had birthed the storm they could not control. The council chamber fell silent. Some collapsed in despair, others wept. In rage, the chancellor alone sat unmoving, whispering, "It is over, the age of fear." His broken human walked down from the ridge, his steps slow but steady. The blizzard parted like curtains before him, each step leaving fire in the snow he reached. The valley where the first hunters had once stalked him, their bones now frozen. Reminders of their failure, he paused, staring at them. His breath cold, he whispered softly, "You thought me prey, but prey does not walk out of the storm a liveth storm." Answered with a roar of thunder, lightning splitting the sky, the galaxy trembled at the sound, worlds shook, stars seemed to dim, fleets faltered, the whisper spread, he speaks with the storm across distant worlds. The people rose, whispers turning to shouts, shouts turning to marches. The council felt its grip weaken, chains snapped not from force but from belief, belief that if one man could endure, if one man could defy the storm, then so could they. Uprisings burned like sparks across the stars. Man, however, did not see this. He walked through the valley until he reached the edge of the abyss where the storm once threatened to swallow him. He stood there staring into its endless depths, his mind heavy with questions. Why me? Why human? Why? Now yet in the silence of the wind he found his answer, because you would not bow. His heart swelled with fire and fear both. He was no god, no legend, only a man scarred and weary, yet he had stood when all others fell, and that was an off storm. Quieted as if waiting for his choice, he raised his eyes to the broken sky and spoke aloud, "I do not fight for thrones, I do not fight for crowns. I fight for those who cannot, for those who will not kneel. I will carry this storm, not as a weapon, but as a promise." His words burned through the storm into the stars, and across the galaxy worlds shuddered with the weight of them.
Wow.
Empires cracked under the sound, and every ruler knew the age of silence was Ganither. Tower behind him began to fade, its light dimming, its walls crumbling into mist as if its purpose was complete. The figure that had once sat on the throne appeared once more only as a shadow, whispering into his ear, "Your storm, now your choice. Guard it well, for the galaxy will test you as it has never tested any before." Then it vanished, leaving only silence. The man turned from the abyss, his eyes burning brighter than ever. He walked back through the valley, the storm following him like a cloak. The galaxy watched and trembled. They saw not a soldier, not a king, not a conqueror, but a human who had endured what none could endure and survived. What none could survive him, though he walked alone. Every being who saw him felt the same truth. Humans were no longer prey. Humans were no longer forgotten. Humans were no longer silent. They were the storm, and the storm had only just begun.